Okay, thanks for the introduction. I just want to make sure that you can hear my voice. Yeah, it's okay. And is it okay if I will sit? Okay, I have a good eye contact. So today, under the title of Correct Mistakes, I really love this title for the Biennale. I'm going to present two stories, two environmental transformation stories in Armenia. One is about a river in the city center in our capital, Yerevan, and the second one is about the river that was transformed into a reservoir, and it's a more complicated story because it's a story of forced displacement, very problematic resettlement, and etc. But before diving into the content of this presentation, I would love to introduce my team and our research laboratory. It's Cultural and Social Narratives Lab. It's a research-based organization. We were founded 2018, 6 years ago. And what is CSN Lab? It's a platform for scientists, researchers, specialists and experts from diverse backgrounds like anthropologists, cultural anthropologists, architects, urbanists, and also culture practitioners and artists to come together to think, reflect, and create. And we are doing various projects on various topics, applying different formats and concepts. Usually we love to publish books and research papers, but also we are organizing exhibitions, conferences, cultural dialogues, and etc. And we have two main working directions. It's memory studies and cultural rights. These are two big umbrellas to analyze and research different topics, and these two directions are very important for us because we believe that through comprehensive memory studies, it is possible to understand the real reality of the past, because both countries, Armenia and Georgia, we are former Soviet countries, and our past is really edited, and our past is, it's a big historical narrative. And only through incomprehensive memory studies it is possible to understand the real reality of the past that are highly connected to our modern cultural and social challenges. And another direction is cultural rights, and we are also doing advocacy for cultural rights because for us and for our team it's really important to start a public discourse on cultural rights and to get that understanding that architecture, urban environment, natural environment, it's not only a heritage, it's also a right, and to have the access to that heritage, to be a part of this heritage is a fundamental right. It's a fundamental human right, and it's a fundamental cultural right. And under these two big umbrellas, we are researching and studying different topics like migration, displacement, cultural heritage, urban spaces and memory, architectural heritage, tangible and intangible heritage, multi-ethnic and peaceful coexistence and memory. And for example, here you can see some of our publications. I just placed those ones because they are highly connected to the architecture and urban environment. Like the first one is Gon's Element of Memory. It's about the social structure of the memory in one of the oldest vernacular districts in Yerevan. The second one is Balat Living Together. It's an international huge project between researchers from USA, UK, Greek, Turkey, and Armenia. It's about Balat district in Istanbul, where we try to analyze the peaceful and multi-ethnic coexistence of Armenians, Jews, and Greeks. Another one is Shushi Mental Maps. We conducted this research right after Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, and it's about Shushi city in Nagorno-Karabakh, and particularly it's about the issue how mental city transforms when community experiences a displacement, forced displacement, and migration. Another examples are Firdous, The Memory of a Place. This is the first publication conducted by CSN Lab in 2018. We started this initiative with Firdous Memory of a Place book. And again, it's about a vernacular district in Yerevan that is, unfortunately, now it's 80% demolished. And these last two publications are the focus of today's talk. It's Getar, Memory of a River, and Kechut, Memory Under the Water. These two projects are about water, are about the transformation, water resources, blue zones. The first one is about a river in our capital, in center of Yerevan, which was canalized during the Soviet period and then covered after the collapse of the Soviet Union in independent Armenia. And this Kechut Memory Under the Water project is about, again, it starts with a river, which then transforms into a reservoir. And Kechut is a name of reservoir, and also it's a name of a village, an old village, which was submerged under the water of the reservoir. And the community of Kechut was forcibly displaced from that area because of this environmental transformation project. And let's start with Getar, Memory of a River. I know that you don't know much about maybe Yerevan or water system of Yerevan, but don't worry, because even a lot of people in Yerevan, they don't know that right in the city center there's a river flowing under the layers of asphalt and concrete. And here you can see the pre-Soviet map of Yerevan before Soviet transformations and before implementation of the master plan by Soviet architect Alexander Tamanyan. And from the left side, you can see Hrazdan River in the Hrazdan Gorge. And from the right side, it's Getar River. And especially Getar River was very important in the life of Yerevan, not only for the irrigation of some gardens and public areas, or not only as a natural drainage system for the city, but also it was very important part of daily life. It was very important part of everyday practices and like memory and identity for people of Yerevan. And it was, it was a communication act in the city center, and it connected three main areas of the city, like educational part on the top, then administrative part of the city, and then the industrial area of Yerevan. But unfortunately, during Soviet period, canalization and I would love to say colonization of the river started. The river was canalized during Soviet period because, first of all, it was an uncomfortable element of landscape for the new master plan, for the Soviet master plan of Yerevan. And secondly, there was the issue of pollution of the river and also a flood of the river. I will talk about it later. But during Soviet period, the river was canalized, and then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, in the independent Armenia, in the city center, river was covered. And we have only few small parts in the city center that are like open from top, but it's really inaccessible, and you will never find the river, or you will never hear the sound of the river if you're not going for the river intentionally, if you don't know where is the river. And what's the situation about Getar now? Here are some photos from the open parts of the river, and it's surrounded by very chaotic structures, and it's covered with roads and a lot of huge buildings and complexes. And now the river is really polluted and it's really smelly. And this smell of the river and that polluted situation with the river was an argument in 2000s to cover the river as a solution for that pollution. And after covering Getar now, especially during these last years, we are just enjoying the revenge of the river in the city, because during springs and autumn and sometimes during heavy rains in June, we are having floods, small floods in Yerevan, and especially for the residential parts or public areas that are underground, it can be a huge disaster during heavy rains. So in order to understand why this river was closed, what was the narrative of the river, what was the reason to canalize and to close the river, and also in order to start the discourse about this river and about the opportunity to have a river in the city center, and and it's not only an opportunity to have a flowing water, it's an opportunity to have a microclimate in a very dry and dusty city. And in order to understand the importance and to voice up the importance of the river from ecological perspective, also from urbanistic and architectural perspective, we started this project. First of all, when we wanted to find an ecologist for the research, we went to the municipality to visit it. We had discussions with some ecologists, and one of them said that you don't need to do that research because Getar is not a river. It is considered as a canal. It is considered as a sewerage. It was really funny, but maybe that dialogue was the reason to start this project, because we were really angry, because even the name Getar means river in Armenian, and in the other regions this river is considered as river, and only in the area of Yerevan it is officially considered as sewerage or just flow of water. So we wanted to understand why the river was closed and what was Yerevan before that Soviet transformations and before the canalization and closure of the river. And in all our research projects, we are applying various methodologies. Like, first of all, we are starting from theoretical research, then studying any kind of archival materials, inviting various experts to conduct their research, to share their ideas about the issue. And firstly, we started and we wanted to understand the image of the city with rivers. And if you will try to find any documentation about the pre-Soviet Yerevan, there are a lot of traveler documentation, sketches and maps, and also there are a lot of reflections of the Yerevan in the literature. You will find a city with two rivers, and in any kind of sketch you will see Hrazdan River and also Getar River flowing from the mountains. And here also you can see Getar and its tributaries. And in the image of Yerevan was, in the image of Yerevan there was always a river, there was always a tributaries of the river, and it flowed like everywhere, because Getar was not just a one stream of water, it was a huge system with main water stream and its tributaries. But something bad happened in 1946. A huge flood of Getar happened in 1946, and after this flood, it was a huge huge flood. It destroyed like residential buildings. Many people were killed during this flood. And after this flood of Getar, new narratives started to evolve around the river. And after the flood, we found a lot of documentations in the state archive about the harmfulness of the river and about the uselessness of the river, because Getar was like not enough big to have hydropower plants on it. And it was really uncomfortable from the perspective of Soviet ideology to have this like useless and harmfulness river in the city. That is why during the Soviet period they canalized the river, and unfortunately this discourse and this very, I think, colonial gaze continued after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in early 2000s our city authorities decided to widen the roads in the city center, and they just covered the river, and now there's a road network on the river. Also there are a lot of buildings, big architectural assemblies on the building. But in parallel, we wanted to understand what is the social memory about the river, not the state narrative, not the historical state one-line narrative about the environment. In all our projects, we want to understand the social memory about the issue, and we are doing field works, and we are conducting in-depth interviews and collecting oral stories to understand how was river reflected in social memory, and what was the importance of the river for the community, for residents of Yerevan. And it's really interesting that in all the oral stories, you will find that people are talking about the river like about the living creature, and they will say that it was a living creature for them. They used to walk with the river to the university, to the work, and river was for them, river was a communication act in the city. And many people will say, especially those who live along the river, who have houses along the river, they will say that it is impossible for them even to sleep without the water of the river, because they are really used to live with the river. And in parallel to this, we also wanted to understand how river is reflected in art and culture, and how this reflection transformed from pre-Soviet period to Soviet period, and then in the independent Armenia. And we collected a lot of visual materials about the river, any kind of visual materials like maps, photographies, sketches, urban maps. Also, we wanted to understand the representation of the river in visual art and audiovisual art, and understand how the river is reflected and how this reflection of the river is transforming during the Soviet period. And another direction to find the river in the art and culture was the literature. And here you can see, for me it's a very important book. It's a book of Kechut Reservoir, Yerevan. Kechut Reservoir was an Armenian writer, and he was sent to Gulag because of this book, and this book was banned during Soviet period. This book is very important in order, if you want to understand the transformations, the Soviet transformations of Yerevan, because in this book, in this novel, it's a discussion, it's a dialogue and debate of two architects. One sent from the St. Petersburg, from the center of power, to implement the Soviet plan of Yerevan, and another architect is a local architect in Yerevan, and they are arguing, they are debating on these transformations of the city. And in this river, the first paragraph of the river starts with the description of the book starts with the description of the river. And Getar River is like everywhere in this book. After conducting all this research during this project, we finalized it and first of all created Getar Memory of a River book. It is available here, you can take, it's free, and you will find different articles about the ecological importance of the river, then about the anthropological aspects, also urbanistic and architectural aspects of the river. But also in this book you will find a text from contemporary Armenian writer Arsen Abrahamyan. We invited Arsen Abrahamyan to reflect on the river as a response to that book of Kechut Reservoir, like a response after 100 years. And you will also find some literary work from Arsen Abrahamyan in the book. And here you can see some presentations, here you can see some photos from the book presentations, but after the presentation of the book and sharing this publication, we also had 3 mini exhibitions about the river in Armenia, and it was really, we were also really happy to see the cultural and art reflection after this book and after the publication of this project. For this year we had different artists and artistic groups had performances along the river about Getar and about the issue and pollution of Getar. And also this book, of course, it went to different conferences, academic and non-academic initiatives. But what is really important for us is to see how youngsters catching this issue of Getar, and it's really inspiring to see how students who are in urban planning, who are in architecture, asking for a book and doing their diploma projects about Getar, and they are trying to imagine how it is possible to develop public spaces along the river, or to, in their imagination, how it is possible to open the river. For the future, we are in negotiations with our municipality and municipality museum, because we really want to create a big exhibition about Getar, and we really want to do it in municipality museum. We are in negotiations, and we are having a lot of discussions with the municipality, and they were saying that yes, for them it's also a huge problem. They are going to develop a plan about the river and etc. And there were also a lot of promises about solving the pollution problem of the river. And that was like election period in Yerevan, and we thought that it's from the list of those promises. But we were so happy when we received an email from the municipality and municipality museum. They were sharing this video, and here you can see that the first mechanical cleaning station is under the construction on the Getar River. Of course, it's a very small drop in the ocean because this cleaning station is only for mechanical pollution, but there's a huge issue of chemical pollution in Yerevan. And we really hope that, like, pushing this discourse about the river, one day it would be possible to have, first of all, to have clean river, clean from mechanical, both mechanical and chemical pollution, to have some public spaces around the river. And one beautiful day, I hope to see Getar opened in the city center and used as a very active green public area. The next project I'm going to talk about, it's again about the river, but in a rural area in one of the regions of Armenia, in Vayots Dzor region, very close to Armenian-Azerbaijani border. We started Kechut Memory Under the Water project as a web project because for us it was really important to make the outcomes of the project really accessible and sustainable. That's why we started this as a web project and then developed a book and published a book. And you can find the book, Getar book, again, it's here and available. But for today, I would love to share and to show with you the web page of this project, because our team of artists did a huge work and I would love to share it with you. Some technical stuff before diving into the story of Kechut village, Kechut Reservoir, and this environmental transformation project in Armenia. I would love to share just some technical things. I forgot to mention that all our projects are bilingual and sometimes in 3 languages. And again, for Getar project, we created this web page in Armenian and in English. And today we are going to see the English version. And I know you will ask, what is this Kechut? How to pronounce it and where is it? I will explain you everything. Kechut, old Kechut, was a village in Armenia. It was a very, very old village. We will talk about its urbanistic characteristics and cultural heritage of the village. And during Soviet period, Kechut Reservoir were constructed on the area of the village, and the community of Kechut were forced to leave their houses, and they were evicted to the new Kechut village, to the new environment. This case of Kechut is very important and interesting case for us to talk about a big issue of eco-migration, because when we are talking about migration and forced displacement, usually it's about wars, it's about armed conflicts, but no one talks about the issue of eco-migration, when thousands of people and communities have to leave their houses because of environmental transformations. And on the case of Kechut, we really wanted to raise this issue and understand the situation of eco-migration in Armenia and particularly in Soviet Armenia. And as I mentioned, we really love to write books, and even in this web project, we went with the structure of the book. We really wanted to tell the story of Kechut and its community and people of Kechut from the start to the end. And in this web page and also in the book, you will find 8 chapters telling about different aspects of this mega project and this displacement. First one is the introduction, then another chapter about the discourse of Soviet Union on the environment. Second chapter is about the old village, its urban characteristics and heritage. Then the construction of the reservoir, then the resettlement of local people, also the social memory about all these traumatic events, and of course conclusion. So let's start with chapter 1, the discourse of the Soviet Union on environment. When we heard about this Kechut situation, it's not a mainstream story in Armenia. People, they don't know that there's a village under the waters of the reservoir. And when we heard this story, we really wanted to understand the discursive environment in the Soviet Union, where it was like a common thing to submerge a settlement and evict an entire community. And we started to analyze all these cases of landscape transformations and understand the discourse of Soviet Union on the environment. And as you all know, that discourse was based on that revolutionary romanticism of building the old world and of demolishing the old world and building the new one. Here are just some posters saying that мы новый мир построим. And when we are talking about the old world, it's not only about pre-Soviet cultural, architectural, and urban heritage of Soviet republics. It's also about natural environment, because this gaze towards environment, this Soviet understanding of the environment, the Soviet understanding of the environment had that gaze of the environment as a treasury, as an antagonist, and you had to domesticate the nature and harness the nature. And in this reforestation plan of Stalin, this ideology is like purely reflected. This is the biggest environmental transformation project in Soviet Union. It was planned to do a huge reforestation without considering the ecological consequences of this reforestment. But also, no one considered the cultural and anthropological consequences of this environmental transformation. But when we're talking about architecture and urban landscape, and the drastic transformations of urban and architectural landscapes, we have to look at the management of water resources in Soviet Union. So during 7 decades of Soviet Union, hundreds of reservoirs and hydropower plants were constructed. And during these constructions and transformations, hundreds of settlements were submerged and thousands of people were forcibly displaced. Maybe the biggest case you may know is the Maloga city and surrounding 300 settlements that were submerged under the water of Rybinsk Reservoir, and thousands of people were evicted. And it's really interesting to see how this was documented in the Soviet archives, because there were people who were refused to leave their houses and they just remained under the water of the reservoirs with their houses. And in the archival materials, those people are like mentioned as mentally ill people who just died during this mega project. Another example is Galyazin city under the waters of Uglitskaya hydropower plant. Only the bell tower remained. And of course, Soviet Armenia as a dry country, and even now after the construction of a lot of reservoirs, we are considered as a country with scarcity of water resources. In Soviet Armenia, during that 7 decades, 80 reservoirs were built. And during the construction of 5 of them, entire settlements were submerged and 5 communities were forcibly displaced. Here you can see a wall of church in Aparan Reservoir. This is Saint Boaz Petros Church of former Old Zovuni village and Kazakh village. Saint Ripsime Church in Dolors Reservoir. This was constructed on the place of Old Dolork village. And even our Yerevan Lake in our capital, it's an artificial reservoir constructed on the area of old Gorb settlement. And now under the waters of Yerevan Lake, there are really old caves and the really old archaeological layers that are decaying, and it's really inaccessible to somehow get out this heritage under the waters. And of course, the case of Kechut, and why are we talking and why are we focused in this project on Kechut village and Kechut Reservoir? Because Kechut Reservoir was constructed within the framework of ARPA-7 mega environmental project. This ARPA-7 project was the biggest environmental transformation project in Armenia. I will talk about the idea, the concept of the project and its implementation later. So within the framework of ARPA-7, the Kechut settlement, its graveyards, architectural and urban heritage, everything was submerged under the waters of the reservoir, and the community of Kechut was forcibly displaced and resettled in a very, very problematic way, and we will talk about it later. So when we started this project, as a very young and sometimes passionate researcher, I really wanted to understand what is under the waters of the reservoir, just physically to see it or to touch it, I don't know. And there was an option with a special drone to scan the reservoir, to have videos and photos, and then edit them, adjust them, and to understand what is under the water. But it was impossible because Kechut village Kechut Reservoir is a strategic object, and Kechut village is really close to the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, and it is really impossible to do those kind of things there. You need a special permission, and it's really hard to do that. Also, after the Azerbaijani attack on 2022, when you will go to the reservoir and stay there like more than 10 or 30 minutes, someone will come and ask you, what are you doing here? Why are you here? But my older colleagues stated that the best way to understand the old village and to understand all this story, to make it more transparent, the only solution is to go to the people of Kechut, to analyze their family archives, their memory, even personal diaries, and etc. And again, in parallel with theoretical research, we started to study the archival materials. And again, we are facing this contrast in family archives and state archives, because in our national archive and different state archives, there is no word about old Kechut village. There is no word about the forced displacement of the community. There are only some documentations about the construction of the reservoir, and also there is just one documentary created by our public TV in Soviet period, just glorifying this project. And again, in that documentary, there is no word about the traumatic events behind the construction of the reservoir. But in family archives, we really managed to find the real image of the village, and with conducting in-depth interviews and collecting oral stories, we managed to understand the real story of Kechut. We don't have much time, and that's why I'm going to be really fast. When we are talking about the old village, of course, people whose houses were submerged, they are always talking, romanticizing everything, their house, their yard, their entire village, and it's a really normal thing after that very traumatic experience. But when we're talking about Kechut, we have to know that it was a very rural and decentralized area. Why I'm mentioning this urban structure? Because it's really important to pay attention to it, because after the resettlement in the new village, this community faced a lot of problems because of the urban structure of the new settlement. That is why I want you to pay the attention of that decentralized structure of the old village. Also, houses in old Kechut had like no barriers, no fences, and everything else, and they were really interwoven, they were really merged, and it was reflected also in the social structure, in the social relations of the community. And talking about Kechut village and Kechut community, we want to imagine, we have to imagine like very rural area and very interwoven social relations. And in the village, there were barns, there were meadows and other like infrastructures really merged to the residential structures, and the community developed their area according to their economic activities, according to their agricultural activities. Because it was a village, they were doing like agricultural stuff, and the urban space was designed, was developed for the agricultural community. And talking about the community spaces, I have to mention the School of Kechut and the Club of Kechut or Culture House of Kechut, because those spaces were very active and very important, not only for Kechut community but also for surrounding settlements. During Russian Empire, people of Kechut wanted to establish a school, but they were villagers and they had no right to have a school and they had no right to the education, and that is why the community, using their resources, financial and intellectual resources, established the Kechut school, and it was very important also for surrounding settlements and for surrounding community. And about the architectural and cultural heritage, I have to say that there were 5 churches in the old village and 2 graveyards, really old from 6th century, and a lot of khachkars. And all this cultural heritage suffered a lot during early Soviet period, because during 1930s, all that materials and churches were demolished, and with these stones and also with khachkars, they used khachkars and all these stones of churches for new buildings as a building material. But all this heritage, it seems that it's completely lost after the construction of the Kechut Reservoir, because now it's under the waters, and it's really, I think it's really important, but it's somehow ironic that after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 2000s, our Ministry of Culture included entire settlement, not only churches or gravestones or khachkars, the entire Kechut settlement is included in the list of immovable cultural heritage. I don't know what are we going to do with it, but it's included in the list. But it decays under the waters of the reservoir. And now let's understand the construction process of the reservoir and how was it problematic, and I would love to explain you that ARPA-7 environmental transformation project here. Before delving into the project and into its main ideas and concepts, I would love to comment this photography. Here you can see Greta in the middle, her husband and Greta's family. They are staying on front of their demolished house on the bank of Kechut Reservoir, and we found in every family, we found this kind of ways of commemoration. It can be a photography, it can be a furniture, even it can be a rug from the old houses, but in every family, in every story, there's a way of commemoration and of the migration of their memory of their old house to the new settlement. And talking about that ARPA-7 project, let me just scroll and show some parts of this documentary. These are some parts of that documentary that I mentioned, created by Public TV of Armenia. So what was the idea and why it was important to implement this ARPA-7 project? So Sevan is a lake in Armenia. It's the biggest lake and it's the main water resource for our country. And during Soviet period, a lot of water was used for hydropower plants. And at some time, Sevan started to drying up. And Soviets decided to solve this environmental problem, creating another environmental problem. And they decided to collect the waters of Arpa River in the Kechut Reservoir and then to dig a tunnel through mountains and direct these waters of the river to the Sevana Lake and to save Sevan Lake from drying up. And Kechut Reservoir was a very important part of this project because all that transfer should have been done with Kechut Reservoir. And here you can see some Here you can see the construction of the tunnel through mountains, and here are some other scenes from the construction of the reservoir. But when we are talking about this decision, we should know that no one, discussed it with the local community or with the representative of the local community. One day they just announced that they are going to build this reservoir and announced that these people are going to displaced. But this story could have been not this kind of traumatizing if they would have been a little bit gentle with this community, because there was also an order for people to demolish their houses with their own hands, because they needed to clean the space, clean the village for the future reservoir, and there was a very strict order to demolish houses before relocation from the village. Here you can see some photography from family archive. This is the demolition of Hadrik's house, and also there are a lot of documentations of these kind of things. Of course, a lot of people refused to demolish their houses, and they just left the village as it was. And another very interesting thing is that people took with them gravestones, a lot of gravestones and khachkars. We call it a migration of architecture, because they collected gravestones and khachkars and constructed a new chapel in the new village. And now if you will visit Kechut, there are two churches. One like small church constructed by people with the stones of the old village, and the new one, which is usually it's empty, and people they prefer to go to this small church near the bank of the reservoir. And as I said, people refused to clean the village, to demolish the village. And in 1981, on March 21, that big celebration and opening ceremony was the big celebration of the opening of this reservoir. A lot of politicians arrived. They just closed the sluice, and water started to fill up the space and to cover the village. And from the other side, there were people who in oral stories they told that they were staying there and watching how the water is submerging their houses. And for them it was some kind of ritual. It was a funeral for them. They were saying goodbye to their houses and to their old lives. And if you think that all these traumatic events are the worst thing that happened to that community, you're wrong, because after this started this resettlement and relocation process of the community, which was very hard and very, very challenging for these people. Because in the new village, this community appeared in a very, very unfamiliar and uncomfortable environment. And this is a question highly connected to the architectural and urban planning. First of all, for the new settlement, people voiced up their desire to have this new Kechut village as a continuation of the old one near the Arpa River, because the river was a very important part of their life. It was very important for the agricultural activities, for the irrigation, but also people used to swim there. There were like pools for girls, for boys, and also there was a lot of celebrations near the river and near the valley surrounding the river. And they voiced up their desire to have this new village, new settlement along the river. But I don't know why new village was placed far from the river. Like, it's just 1 kilometer far from the river, but it took the river from the community, and now they are no way connected to the river. They are unable to use the water for the irrigation, and etc. And river and water are out from their life and from all their practices, because they are not allowed to use waters of the reservoir. They are not allowed to swim there because it's dangerous, and also they are not allowed to fish there in the reservoir. And talking about the settlement, it's really important to talk about the urban structure of the settlement. As I mentioned, Old Kechut village was a very decentralized environment, very rural, like normal village. But in the new area, they introduced a new plan for the village. It was more resembling in an urban area. It was a rectangular grid of streets, and then like building blocks and rectangular network of pavements and etc. And all the meadows, barns, and other like infrastructure for the agricultural activities were merged and relocated far from the village. And this was a turning point for the community, because after this relocation, it was very hard to continue their agricultural activities, and a lot of people had no other choice than to like sell their pets and try to find other way of income and other way of sustenance. And the biggest issue was the housing in the new village. Of course, people were promised that they are going to get private houses with attached barns and gardens and fields and everything else, but it never happened. Those private houses, firstly, they were merged into like 2 houses in one building, then 4 houses in the one building, and eventually these typical communal houses were constructed for 8 families in the one building, and those houses are really small, and they have to share like the bathrooms and other stuffs within this building. And when now you will visit Kechut village and you will observe the environment, you can see how people transformed their environment, and you can see this conflict between community and their living environment, because people they kind of refuse to use this rectangular network of streets and pavements and etc. And they are using their own communication paths and areas that are very organic. And if you will see the houses of Kechut, they are all transformed. You will find a lot of balconies, terraces on these communal houses. And also you will find a lot of gardens in the layers of asphalt, because people are trying to recreate their previous life and somehow to maintain their agricultural community and their agricultural activities. And when I'm saying that this environment was highly uncomfortable for this community, it is really evident to see that a lot of families decided to leave this new village. In 90s, they decided to go to the surrounding regions of Nagorno-Karabakh, and there was a resettlement program after the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, and people decided to leave this new Kechut because it was really uncomfortable, and they hoped that in that new environment they will find a place, they will find a fertile space of living. But those people experienced multiple migration, and again they were forcibly displaced to the new Kechut village after the second Nagorno-Karabakh war. And now they are trying to, after like 30 years, they are trying to adapt in this environment. In the project, I have very limited time to tell you about like everything. You will find everything in the book, and also it is available in our web page. But in the project, we also included oral stories, some of oral stories, for you to understand and to read the real experience of people. And just as a conclusion, I would love to highlight maybe 3 things about all this topic, about this water resource transformation topic. First of all, it's really interesting to see, especially in the case of Kechut, how these elements of nature landscape, the river and the water, transformed as a sign. Because before all these transformations, water as a source of life, it was a very nurturing stream for the village. But now, what's the situation? Water turned into a gray water, and it was and the entire reservoir, it's some kind of memorial, it's some kind of memorial of their trauma. And they are in a relation to the water, and they are in a relation with this reservoir only as a graveyard, only as a sign of trauma. And a lot of people will go to reservoir like twice a month or once a month. And they even claim that during dry summers, they can see the houses near the banks of the reservoir. They can see the walls of their houses. And it's really interesting how they are trying to save the memory of their old village and how they are documenting their old life and old environment. Another thing that I would love to talk about is we call it the shadow of Soviet modernism, because when you will say Kechut or Kechut Reservoir, a lot of people will recall the Margaritka structure. It's a tunnel, it's a Margaritka daisy-shaped tunnel, and it's a very famous example of Soviet modernism. And a lot of people will talk about this structure, this tunnel and Margaritka, but many know that under this sign of Soviet modernism, there's a story of people, there's a story of trauma, and there's a story of forced displacement. And when we're talking about the shadow of Soviet modernism, it's a huge issue I think, in all post-Soviet countries, because when we are talking about Soviet modernism, and especially architects, we really love these astonishing buildings and everything else. But few know that usually all these structures, all this modernization in the Soviet Union, they shadow a lot of stories, a lot of traumatic stories happen to the different communities. And we need to talk about the Soviet modernization in this way, not only considering it as an ordinary development of infrastructure or urban environments or architecture. And the last thing I would love to highlight is the decolonization of our understanding of nature. Today I'm in Georgia, and I think we have a lot of similarities, like our lab in a very, very intensive dialogue with Georgia. We are doing different projects on different topics. And I think especially in South Caucasus region and for post-Soviet countries, there's the issue of desovietization and decommunization and decolonization. Unfortunately, Armenia had no chance for that desovietization, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Nagorno-Karabakh war started, that dark years started in 90s, and we had no chance to rethink our understanding in like every aspect of our life, and also we had no chance to rethink and decolonize our understanding on environment and our understanding of nature. And why are we talking about these water transformation projects? I would just love to finish with this photography from Kechut village. Why are we talking about, why are we conducting these researches? We are doing all these exhibitions and etc. Because we really want to start that decolonial discourse in post-Soviet Armenia. Because a lot of post-Soviet countries, they had that opportunity of decommunization, but we never ended, we never finished our decolonization and desovietization. And that is why we are talking about, we are doing all these projects on urban environment, on architectural heritage, and also nature landscape, because we don't even realize that our gaze towards these phenomena are very colonized, because we are in a deep, deep state of self-colonization. And that is why we are talking about this. And another important thing is that it is really impossible to maintain our life, to maintain our development, to maintain our development of our infrastructures without like transforming the nature. It's really impossible. And we really want to talk about these kind of issues, to talk about these kind of events from our past, because we really believe that is possible to modernize infrastructure, to modernize urban areas without destroying architectural heritage, without destroying urban areas, and also without traumatizing communities and traumatizing their identity and memory. Thank you. That's maybe all about these two projects.